going to go back in with my cream because I feel like this needs lightened up a little bit. And it comes into cream at the end. Now the drawing I'm working from, it has quite warm tones, so I'm now going to build up a wee bit of sienna brown, and that's again a Prismacolor, nice and creamy. It'll build up a layer quite quickly, and it's just going to add a bit of warmth in here. This is quite a warm looking dog. It's got a lot of lovely kind of gingery tones. But what I will say is just be careful when you're looking at dogs, cats, whatever you're drawing. Just make sure that you are observing what's in front of you. It's really easy to look at, you know, a ginger dog and think it's full of orange. Occasionally it'll contain orange, but a lot of the times it's browns, creams, all sorts in there. Not always orange. So just make sure that you are actually observing what's in front of you and not guessing. Very easy to do, especially with them. Black and white dogs are probably the worst for that. It's very easy to look at them and think they're black or they're white, and quite often they contain very little of that. Black dogs are one of my favourites, and it's because they actually contain purples and blues and all sorts. Okay, so I'm just going to take that detail in there as well. As you can see, that it's getting darker in these little kind of shadow areas. They'll keep getting darker and add more depth. Now we're starting to get to a point where the pencil isn't taken to the paper quite as much. We're starting to build up those layers. And it's at that point when you start feeling like I've covered the paper, it's starting to build up quite a lot. I'm not sure I'm adding anything here. That's when we're almost at the blending stage. Before I do, I'm just going to darken some of my darks. So I'm going in with dark umber, and I'm just going to pick out a few bits that I feel are quite a bit darker. So a little bit there. And again, like I say, don't worry too much about the detail at this point. We just want to get in the movement. And where it's at the edge of the face, I'm going to actually just bring in the face. I know that sounds odd, but I'm going to bring in the face, which then creates these loose bits coming into the face. So sometimes I'll do things in reverse to what you would perhaps imagine. So if you've got little loose hairs coming into the face, sometimes it's easier working from the face and creating the shadow in reverse, and that gives you those little wispy pieces coming in. We can add more detail to them further in. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with how that's going, and I think at this stage we probably want to get in with the blender pen. So as you can see, it's a little bit grainy at the moment. We've got some of our main colours mapped in. Okay, so before we start blending, I just wanted to take a wee minute to show you the paper I use. So it's Paint On Multi Techniques paper, and it's A4 I'm using at the moment. It's a Clairefontaine paper, and the reason I like using it is it's just got a nice texture. It's textured without being gritty or without having too much texture that your pencil gets lost in. So really nice paper to use, and relatively cheap as an art paper actually. Quite inexpensive, so it's a great one if you just want to experiment and try things out. I'm just going to go in with the blender pen now. Now, this is the blender pen I use. It's a Derwent blender pen, and it's an alcohol blender. And what I'm going to show you is, because I use it, as you can see on the tip there, there's a little bit of pigment on it. Now, I'm not worried about that because I had used it on this dog, so the pigment is the same kind of tones as what I'm using, so I'm not overly worried about that. However, it's always worth checking before you start. You don't want to take pigment that you've used on a previous drawing, say I'd been drawing a black animal or something like that. You don't want to then take that and smear it all over your current drawing. So always make sure it's kind of cleaned off if it has got any pigment from before. You can do that quite simply just by, on a scrap bit of paper, just give it a little scribble and it'll take the pigment off. Now I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to show you, I just followed the direction of the fur again, and you want to use just light pressure at first till you get the hang of it. So as you can see, and you see very quickly, it blends that graininess away. Now it also moves some of the pigments. If you look closely at this area here, as I've swiped that up, I've let it go just beyond where the pencil is, and it gives this kind of lovely kind of blurry effect that goes through. And as you can see, that's already, without too much effort, covered the paper completely. So we've no grain, we've no white showing through, and we've got this nice kind of blurry effect around the edge. And that, once you then layer on top of that, that'll give you a lovely depth. So it gives a softness to your fur. It makes it look like perhaps you've got lots of fur there rather than just one layer. You know, it gives a bit of realism. Again, you can see here, I'm just taking it slightly beyond where the pencil strokes are, and that just gives you that wee bit of blurriness around your edges so it's not too harsh. Always, like everything else, always follow the direction of the fur. And I'm just going to take it across the face slightly there just to blend that in. And if you feel, when you've touched the dark, I'm just going to show, I'm going to drag a little bit of this dark colour just to show you. So if I just push a little bit, you can see that dark coming across, and that will cover your lights. So you need to be very careful. If it's starting to pick up too much pigment, just wipe it off on a piece of paper before you move on. Otherwise, you're going to get rid of all your lights. And that's also part of the reason why at the beginning of the process I wanted to map out my darks and my lights, so that you don't lose them in this part. It's a lovely technique just to blend all your colours together, and you get some lovely mixing happen on the paper as well. As you can see, I'm bringing my browns in there, they're merging into my creams, they're creating some lovely mid-tones in between. This bit here is a perfect example when you take the dark down into the light and you get the mid-tone kind of creates itself. And that's part of the reason I really enjoy using the blender pen. You get this lovely kind of mixing on the paper, and it's smoothing all that out. Now you might be looking and thinking, oh, but you've lost all your detail and, you know, we've got a bit mucky or whatever. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. The beauty of colour pencil is layering it, and you will nearly always go through an ugly stage before it becomes beautiful again. So do not panic, it will become lovely again. So I'm going to leave that section to dry. So it doesn't take long, literally just a minute or so. But the reason for that is if you go in straight away with a pencil, that pencil is going to hit the alcohol in the pen and it's going to start melting into the paper straight away. And it's just too, it becomes too thick. It softens the pencil too much. So you don't get detail, you start to get a bit, it gets a bit clogged up, shall we say. So you want to just let that dry properly before you put on your second layer. Now, while I'm waiting on that,